Nice to meet you, Sunny. I am I am in Dharma school and learning Buddhism, and I learned that um, we seek happiness, which comes together with sufferings. And I wonder, what are those examples of happiness that comes with suffering? And are there any happiness that doesn't come with suffering?
네. 아주 내가 좋아하고 사랑하고 아끼는 그런 남편이 갑자기 죽었을 때 더 슬플까요? 그냥 살면서도 나한테 오히려 괴로움을 많이 주고 귀찮은 그런 남편이 죽었을 때가 더 여성에게, 아내에게 괴로움이 클까요?
For example, imagine yourself that you're a wife, you're married to a husband. So if your husband dies, which husband, would you be sadder if the husband was a really loving husband who took care of you and who provides you with all the support you needed and who was warm and loving? Or if your husband was, somebody who actually brought you suffering every day, who abused you, and somebody that you barely could, stand living with or seeing, which would cause you more suffering?
내가 좋아하는 물건을 가졌을 때 기쁠까요? 별로 좋아하지 않는 물건을 가졌을 때 기쁠까요?
And which would cause you more delight, obtaining something that you consider really precious, that you really liked, or being given something that you don't want to have?
그러면 좋아하는 물건을 잃었을 때 더 슬플까요? 그냥 보통 물건을 잃었을 때 더 슬플까요?
Then what happens if you lose it? And which would cause you more suffering if you lose something that was really precious to you, or if you lose something that you didn't even care to have in the first place?
이 세상에 존재하는 것은 어떤 것도 영원하지 않다는 걸 알 겁니다.
So you already realize that nothing is permanent in this world.
그건 즐거움도 변해갈 거고, 좋아하는 것도 변해갈 거고, 싫어하는 것도 변해갈 겁니다.
So joy will change, happiness will change, your likes and dislikes will change.
그러니까 좋음이 클수록 그것을 잃었을 때, 변화해서 잃었을 때 괴로움이 크다.
So, the suffering, the amplitude of suffering will really be proportional to the amplitude of your joy.
괴로움이 클수록 그것이 변화하면 거꾸로 즐거움이 커집니다.
But vice versa, if the greater the suffering, then conversely, the greater the happiness that comes after the suffering.
이렇게 해서 그 어떤 것도 다 즐거움이 클수록 잃었을 때 괴로움이 크고, 괴로움이 클수록 그것이 사라졌을 때 기쁨이 크다.
So no matter what it is, the bigger the joy for having it, then the bigger the suffering for losing it. Well, conversely, the bigger the suffering, in not having it, then the bigger the joy for losing it.
그것을 우선 이건 사실이니까 사실을 알아야 합니다.
Basically, this is a fact of life. So it's important for us to recognize the fact of life.
여기서 우리는 두 가지 선택을 할 수 있습니다.
Then faced with this fact of life, we can make two choices.
즐거움을 추구하지 않음으로 해서 괴로움을 받지 않는다.
So we do not pursue joy, therefore we avoid gaining suffering.
즐거움을 추구함으로 해서 괴로움도 기꺼이 받아들인다.
Or pursue joy, but willingly accept the suffering that comes with it.
그런데 대다수 사람들은 즐거움은 추구하되 괴로움은 받지 않으려고 합니다.
But most of us want to pursue joy, but we want to avoid the suffering that comes with it.
근데 그것이 올 수밖에 없습니다.
But suffering after joy is inevitable.
그러니까 더 그 괴로움이 커지는 겁니다.
And therefore we actually amplify the suffering by trying to avoid it.
그래서 제가 여러분께 말씀드리지 않습니까?
That's why we tell you this.
인연을 지었으면 그 결과를, 과보를 받을 각오를 해라.
So if you have if you have created a cause, then you have to be willing to accept the effect. If you made that connection, you have to be willing to accept the karma that comes from that connection.
그 결과를 받기 싫거든. 원인을 짓지 마라.
Then if you don't want to accept the suffering that comes from that cause, effect that comes from that cause, then don't create the cause in the first place.
그건 내가 선택하는 거예요.
That's your choice.
이건 하나님하고 부처님이 하는 게 아니에요.
This is not something that God ordains or Buddha demands.
Thank you. Then, in your experience, do you think it will be easier to have happy life living as like a Buddhist monk in modest way, or the other way? Just accept the suffering and happiness together.
가장 인간이 생존하는데 최소한도 필요한 게 먹고 입고 자는 겁니다.
So eating, sleeping, and wearing clothes, those are basic essentials for a human being to survive.
그것을 얻어먹고 주워 입고 아무데나 자겠다고 해서 거기로부터 자유로워지면 괴로울 일이 없습니다.
And then if you allow yourself to say that, you know what, I'm going to beg for food, I'm going to just wear clothing that others have discarded, I'm going to sleep everywhere, anywhere that I can find myself in the forest floor or whatnot, then you free yourself from those basic necessities.
근데 오늘날 출가한 성녀들도 대부분 그렇게 못 살고 있습니다.
However, even the ordained monks these days cannot live like that.
그러니까 성녀들도 괴로움이 생기는 거예요.
And that creates suffering, even on those monks.
그렇게 살아야만 괴로움이 없어지느냐? 그렇지 않습니다.
But does that mean we all have to live like that as ascetics in order to free ourselves from suffering? No.
여러분들은 지금 그걸 생각하면 지금 바로 괴로움에서 벗어날 수 있습니다.
Because if you actually think back to that, you can actually free yourself from suffering right here and now.
뭘 먹어도 얻어먹는 것보다는 잘 먹고 있지 않습니까?
Because whatever you eat is better than begging for food.
뭘 입어도 주워 입는 것보다는 잘 입지 않습니까?
Whatever you wear is better than picking up clothing that others have discarded.
여러분들이 자는 그 어느 곳이든 나무 밑이나 동굴보다는 낫지 않습니까?
And wherever you're sleeping tonight, it's better than sleeping on a forest floor or inside a cave.
그렇기 때문에 여러분들이 지금 괴로울 일이 뭐가 있어요?
Then what do you have to suffer about?
버려서 벗어나는 길도 있지만은 있는 거에 대해서 만족해버리면 이 문제가 해결이 됩니다.
So you can free yourself from suffering by discarding everything you own. Or you can also free yourself from suffering by recognizing how much you have already.
같이 살면 혼자 사는데 외롭지 않는데 같이 사는데 뭐가 문제가 있겠어요?
And you know what? We're not alone. We don't have to be lonely living by ourselves. But if you live with somebody, then what do you have to worry about?
같이 사는 귀찮으면 혼자 살면 되잖아요.
And if you don't like all that comes with living with somebody, then you can choose to live by yourself.
혼자 사는 거는 내가 결정할 수 있잖아요.
And because these things you can decide.
그러나 같이 사는 거는 상대하고 협의를 해야 되잖아요.
You can do whatever you want by living yourself, but with others, if you live somebody else, then you got to compromise and negotiate.
그래서 조금만 더 살펴보면 여러분들이 괴로울 일이 없어요.
So if you look a little bit deeply, one layer down, you realize that there's nothing for you to suffer about.
여러분들이 더 잘 먹겠다, 더 잘 입겠다, 더 좋은 집에 살겠다, 더 내 마음에 드는 사람하고 살겠다. 이렇게 하니까 이게 끝이 없는 거예요.
So you're constructing your own suffering because you want to eat better, you want to wear better clothes, you want to sleep in a more richer bed, or you want to live with somebody else.
그것도 또 남하고 비교해서 더 낫겠다고 하니까.
And it's endless because this is all relative. You're all constantly comparing yourself to others.
이게 어떻게 경제가 성장한다고 지위가 높아진다고 어떻게 해결이 되겠어요?
And how are you going to solve this endless cycle? Because you're constantly comparing yourself to be better.
저는 제가 경험하고 있습니다.
Now, I'm experiencing this myself.
제가 초등학교 때 1960년이 한국의 1인당 국민소득이 $100였어요.
So when I was growing up, when I was in elementary school, the GDP in Korea was $100.
지금 35,000불이에요.
Right now, it's 35,000.
그럼 내 주위에 있는 사람들이 350배 행복해졌느냐는 거예요.
So you have to ask then, those people around me, are they 350 times happier than they were before?
아니면 35배라도 행복해졌느냐?
Are they at least 35 times happier than they were before?
아니면 3배라도 행복해졌느냐?
Are they at least 3 times happier than they were before?
제가 지금 내가 자란 그 동네에 지금 있습니다.
I'm actually living and farming in the village that I grew up.
누구도 3배 더 행복해졌다고 어떤 증거도 없습니다.
And there's no one that tells me they're 3 times happier than they were before.
그때는 먹을 수 있는 것으로서 사람들이 행복을 삼았습니다.
Because when we were growing up, we were happy just to have something to eat.
명절 때 설에 양말 한 컬레 사주면, 운동화 하나 사주면 공동 우물가에 가서 동네 사람 보라고 자랑스럽게 왔다 갔다 하면서 기뻐했습니다.
So if we actually were gifted a pair of sneakers or a pair of socks, during the New Year's holiday, then we actually went to the village square to show it off.
운동화 떨어질까 봐 해서 학교 갈 때 이렇게 맨발로 갖고 가서 교문 앞에 가서 신고 나오면 또 벗어서 갖고 다니고 이랬습니다.
We actually wanted to save our sneakers, so we walked bare feet to school, wore the sneakers to show off during the school, then took them off again to walk home.
그래도 아이들은 웃으면서 즐겁게 살았습니다.
But the kids were happy, they were smiling, enjoying themselves.
지금 아이들이 늘 컴퓨터에 앉아 있는 게 더 행복하다고 볼 수 있을까요?
Do you think the kids today, they're always spending their time in front of screen, are they happier?
매일매일 그 입시 공부에 찌들어 있는 게 행복하다고 볼 수 있을까요?
Or the kids who have to study every single waking moment to get into college, are they happier?
직장에 묶여가 기계처럼 아침에 출근하고 퇴근하고 스트레스 받아 술 마시고 그게 행복하다고 할 수 있을까요?
Or the working people who are actually stressed out with the routine work every day from day to night and kind of drink themselves out of their own sorrow and fatigue, are they happier?
그렇다고 그럼 옛날이 더 낫다고 할 수 있느냐? 그것도 아닙니다.
But are we saying that before was better than today? I'm not saying that.
제가 볼 때는 생존권은 보장이 되어야 합니다.
Because I believe that people's survivability should be guaranteed.
음식을 못 먹어서 배를 굶거나 병들었는데 치료받지 못하는 것은 정말 큰 고통입니다.
Because it is really great pain and suffering for you not to be able to eat when you're hungry or not to be able to be treated when you're sick.
전쟁이 나서 죽거나 또는 고문을 당하거나 또는 피난을 다닌다는 것은 정말 고통스러운 일입니다.
And it's truly a great pain and suffering, to be killed or maimed during war or to be tortured or to have to leave your house, become home and become refugees.
그래서 우리는 이런 것은 일어나지 않도록 해야 합니다.
So we have to prevent these things from happening.
이런 것은 개선해야 합니다.
And we have to improve on these.
그러나 그 이상의 문제는 과연 어떤 게 더 잘 산다고 말할 수가 없습니다.
But beyond that, no one can say definitively which is a better way to live.
그 무엇이 인간을 행복하게 하느냐 이 문제를 우리는 탐구해야 합니다.
So the question we need to investigate is what really makes people happy.
즉 어떤 것이 괴로움 없이 살 수 있는 길이냐 하는 겁니다.
In other ways, what is the path by which we can free ourselves from suffering as we live?
꼭 부처님 말씀을 듣고 경전을 읽어야 알 수 있는 게 아니라 우리 삶을 지나간 삶을 살펴보면 알 수 있습니다.
And we can learn the answer by just doesn't necessarily listening to Buddha's lectures or reading his sutras. If you examine our past life, the path that we have lived, we can get at the answer.
우리가 중학교나 고등학교 때 학생 때 시험 쳐서 월말 시험 쳐서 성적이 조금 떨어지거나 오르거나 하면 좋아하고 괴로워하는 게 얼마나 컸습니까?
So when we were actually in school, our happiness really hinged on how much we scored, how high we scored on the midterms or final exams.
지금 돌아보면 그게 뭐 중요합니까?
But looking back now, what difference did it make?
우리가 10년 전에 어디 여행 가서 맛있는 거 먹었다, 좋은 호텔에 잤다. 그게 지금 생각하면 뭐 그렇게 중요합니까?
If we went on a trip 10 years ago and, ate good food or slept in a nice hotel, looking back, how important is that to your life, really?
지금 우리 일어나는 것도 마찬가지입니다.
Same thing to things that's happening to us now.
지금 먹는 거, 입는 거, 감각적인 게 지금은 굉장히 중요하지만은 지나놓고 보면 다 별일 아니에요.
So all these things that kind of enrich and stimulate our senses right now to give us joy could be important today, but looking back, it really won't be.
그럼 지나놓고 별일 아닌 거를 지난 뒤에 아는 게 낫어요. 지금 바로 별일 아니라는 걸 알면 돼요.
So is it better for us to look back and realize that those things were not that important after a while, or recognize that these things are not really that important to our happiness right here and now?
왜 우리는 늘 지나놓고 그것을 알아요? 오히려
So
지금
why
아는
do
게
we
더
always-
낫지.
So why don't we take lessons learned here and now instead of waiting for a while to actually learn the same lessons?
그래서 지금 여기 깨어 있으라는 거예요.
That's why we tell people to be awake in the here and now
지금 여기가 좋은 줄 알아야 된다.
and recognize that you're living your best life here and now.
Thank you very much, Sneem.
네.
Yeah, I've always wanted to live a happy life and thinking about what is happy life. And I realized that if I look back on my life, then actually my life can be happier. And I have to think about my life more so that I can realize that my life is happier than I thought. Thank you very much.
어떻게 살았든 지나놓고 보면 다 괜찮아요.
So no matter what kind of life you led, if you look back on it, it's okay.
지나놓고 봤는데도 그게 상처가 됐다 하면 대부분 그건 병입니다. 트라우마입니다.
So if you look back on your life and still it causes suffering to you, then you know that it's trauma.
정상적인 사람이라면 지나가 버리면 그것이 별일 아닌 게 되는 게 정상적입니다.
So if you're a healthy person, looking back on your past life, you realize that, it was no big deal. Everything was okay.
물건을 잃어버렸을 때 그때는 아깝지만은 지나놓고 보면 뭐 별일 아니에요.
So if you lose something, you know what? You're going to suffer because you lost that something when you lost it. But if you look back after a while, you realize it's no big deal that you lost it.
뭐 남편이나 아내가 죽거나 부모가 죽거나 한 것도 그때는 큰 일이지만은 10년 정도 지나놓고 보면 다 별일 아니에요.
And even if you lost a loved one, a loving wife or a loving husband or your parents, at that point of loss, the suffering is great. But after years, 10 years or so, looking back, you realize, you know what, it's something you can live with. So it wasn't that big a deal.
그래서 우리 인간이 이렇게 다 살아갈 수 있는 거예요.
And that's how we can make our way through our lives.
근데 지나놓고 봤는데도 그것이 잊혀지지가 않고 상처가 돼가 남아있다면 이것은 다 정신적인 질환에 속합니다.
But if the suffering continues and it's still acute after a while, then you know it's traumatic to you. Then it's basically a mental illness that has taken root.
옛날엔 그건 병인 줄 몰랐습니다.
In the past, we didn't realize that this was a sickness.
최근에 들어와서 이거 트라우마다, 이게 병이다 이걸 알게 됐죠.
And only recently we realized what these were traumas that can be treated.
그래서 여러분들이 순간적으로 화를 내거나 싫어하는 거는 정상적입니다.
So the fact that you react to the event at the point of it happening with an emotional reactions, whether you get angry or you cry, that's normal.
물론 현실에 깨어 있으면 그렇게 안 하면 더 좋죠.
Of course, you don't have to do it. If you're awake in the here and now, you can actually you don't actually have to engage in that.
그러나 한참 동안 그것을 움켜쥐고 있다. 그래서 미워하고 원망한다. 그러면 그건 병이에요.
But if you hold on to that same emotion and continue to hate and to suffer because of it, then it's more of a sickness.
근데 여러분들이 병을 병인 줄 몰라요.
But what you don't realize is that you don't recognize sickness as a sickness.
그것은 치료가 필요한 거예요.
And sickness needs treatment.